Welcome to episode 2 of Let's Talk Runners. Now, I'm going to be completely transparent and honest with you. I've already attempted to record this episode when comparing two running shoes, two of the ones that you'll see in the title and the thumbnail of this video, and I'll be honest, it just turned into me ranting about the prices of these shoes, or particularly the price of one of them. So I thought I would re-record it and try and make it a little bit more concise, as I just ranted for about 50 minutes. So, there you go. Here's episode 2 of Let's Talk Runners. Now, the reason I wanted to do this episode was to talk about two more popular running shoes that came out. One of them came out at the tail end of 2024, and the other one came out in 2025, but I think that both of them were probably the most popular running shoes of this last year. Now, popular, I am referring to us nerds, the people who are into this sort of thing. I'm not referring to the general population. The most popular running shoe of this year was actually, according to Strava, the Megablast 5, which I was quite surprised about. I always assumed that everybody just got the Nike Pegasus, but the Megablast 5 was actually the most popular, so yay to Asics. What's not so much a yay to Asics is the price of one of the shoes here, the Megablast, but we'll get to that in a second. Now, the Run Testers, a fellow YouTuber or YouTube group, have an award ceremony that they do at the end where they reward a bunch of shoes, and the two shoes that won, or 1 and 2, were the Evo SL, this one right here, and the Megablast, this one right here. Now, the purpose of this video isn't to break down the key specifics of each shoe, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time doing that. It's actually to break down what I believe to be the biggest differences, while also trying to keep it together without ranting. Now, what we have here when considering both shoes are some very responsive daily trainers that have the brand's more premium foams in them. In the Evo SL, the shoe here, we have Light Strike Pro. Now, it's not the Light Strike Pro that you'll find in their Pro 4, their current race lineup, but it is the one that you would find in their Pro 3, the generation from before, and also some of their other race shoes like the Takumi Sen line. This is the Sen 8, but it is a slightly different foam than you have in their newer race shoe, which is a little bit annoying and misleading. Adidas, like Nike, do this thing where they have a bunch of foams that they put in their more premium race offerings and call them all the same thing, but they're actually different foams, all made of different materials, and they're clearly doing that as a marketing strategy to get you to buy more of their shoes. You can imagine the scenario: you go into a running shoe shop, you see the Pro 4, £220, and you go, I ain't gonna buy that. Then you see the Pro Evo, £130, and you go, I'll buy that. It's got the same foam in it after all. It doesn't, but it is a really good foam, and it makes the shoe really responsive. And then on the other hand, we have the Asics shoe that also has their FF Turbo squared foam in it. Also a very responsive foam. This one here is an aliphatic TPU foam. You're seeing a lot more of that material. It's showing up in Asics' own race shoes, but also in some other brands' race shoes like Puma, who just came out with their Nitro Elite sort of lineup, where they've got two shoes that have aliphatic TPU foams in them. So that's what you've got here. You've also got fairly similar uppers in that they're quite stripped back. This one here is an engineered mesh upper with not a lot of padding on it, but there's enough there. But I'll get to sort of how comfortable it is in a bit. And the Asics shoes has an engineered mesh and woven upper this time here. So a lot of similarities between the two. So I thought I would break down what are the key differences between the two. But then eventually I just got onto the price, because that's probably going to be the biggest difference when considering buying both of these shoes here. The Adidas comes in at £130, an incredibly competitive price when you consider what other brands are doing at a very similar price. And the Asics comes in at an equally competitive price. of 210. Yep. Now this is where my original video ended up going. I broke down the biggest differences between the two when considering the foams, the experience that I've had in both of them, but it ends up coming down to how much money each brand is saying that you have to pay to get this experience. Because right here, you've got the Adidas. Now don't get me wrong, I don't think that this is a perfect shoe. There's a lot that I don't like about the shoe, but there's also a lot that I do like about the shoe, and one of them being that price. £130 is fantastic considering what's on offer here. The Asics, I'll be honest, there's more that I like about this shoe. I do think it's the better one out of the two. However, what Asics are trying to tell me is that this shoe is £80 more than this shoe as far as what they're offering. And there's just no way that that's the case. What you're getting with the Evo SL is an incredibly responsive shoe that for some people is really versatile. Now personally, not so much for me. I do tend to lean more towards those quicker and faster efforts when using this shoe. However, it's also the case here. I think this one's a bit more versatile, but I do think that there are other shoes that I can do a lot more different types of runs in. If you want to know what I'm talking about, you can go back to my original video that I did on the Asics Blast lineup. It's the first video on this channel. I break down the differences between the Nova Blast, the Super Blast, and the Megablast, this one here. But I definitely think that it's a lot more versatile than this one. Although there are some problems that I have with the Evo SL, none of them are that big to the point where I would say that this shoe is worth that much more than this shoe here. And that's the annoying thing. Like, I don't know why Asics are charging £200, £210 for daily trainers. It's insane, that kind of money. I am trying to stay calm here, but this is more of like a podcasty, free-formy type of format that I've decided to go with this series. However, just listening to me rant and rave for 40 minutes isn't a particularly enjoyable watch, so I am going to try and keep everything a little bit calmer. But it is insane when considering them, and in the original video I kept going on about how good this shoe was and everything you can do in it, regardless of the caveats, and I just couldn't really figure out why most people would ever consider spending £80 more to get this shoe here. Now I'm going to be honest with you, I didn't pay £80 more. I managed to get this shoe on deal at Sports Shoes with a really good discount code, so I got this for about £145. Now I'm not saying that it is £145 worth of shoe. I think that when you compare it to the current market and when comparing it to a lot of other shoes, this shoe could probably come in at about £170, maybe £180 at most. Although I do think £180 is a lot of money. If they're positioning this as a step up on the Super Blast, then I'd be okay with that, because I actually think the Super Blast is about £160 worth of shoe when comparing that to the competitors that are making very similar types of shoes. However, I don't think that this shoe is £130 worth of shoe when comparing it to its competitors. I think that what Adidas have done is they've made £150 worth of shoe and then sold it to everybody for £130. Now, that's clearly been done deliberately by Adidas. They're essentially just trying to undercut the market, but fair play to them, because they have. I've been seeing a lot more of this shoe on everyone's feet than this shoe here. And that's where I'm having a problem with this video entirely, because I was going to talk about the key differences between the two and then break down which one I would recommend to the majority of people. But I just find it really difficult to just not say, it doesn't matter the key differences, pay the £130, because you're going to get a lot more for your money. And for me personally, that's always going to be the case. I don't know if I'm just a stingy individual, but considering the price of both of these and considering what you get from both of them, I just don't see why I'd recommend this one over this one here. The only thing I could think of is if you were looking to just buy one running shoe for your entire rotation, so you didn't want anything else in there, then I would say, okay, pay a little bit more money and get the Megablast, because I do think that it does do other types of runs a little bit better. For example, those slower, easier efforts. I mean, it's not an easy, slow running shoe, but it does them a bit better than the Evo SL. Now for this next section of the video, I am going to try and break down the key differences between these two running shoes here, based purely on my experience. Remember, I'm just one person with one set of feet, so I can only talk about my personal experience. For reference, I run a very specific type of way, like every single person watching this, so if I say something about a shoe, that isn't entirely reflective on your own experience as well. So I'm going to try my best to try and give you as an idea, but at the same time, always remember that this is my experience that I'm referring to. Now, when it comes to both of these shoes, there are slight differences on the makeup. This shoe here, the Evo SL, is a 39.5mm stack with a 6mm drop. There's a wide base on the bottom, and you've got a little cutout on the inside that we'll talk about a little bit. On the Asics, we have a 45mm stack height with an 8mm drop, also very wide, but no cutout on the middle. Now, although there is 5mm extra off stack on the Asics when compared to this shoe here, and I definitely find the Evo SL to be a little bit more nimble. I mean, there's less shoe there. The back of the heel, for example, as you can see, doesn't protrude near as much as what Asics have here, and also at the back of the heel, you've got a lot more shoe here when compared to here. So it is definitely more nimble. However, I personally land more mid to forefoot, and particularly when I speed up, I'm actually more forefoot than midfoot. So because of that, I'm landing at the front of the shoe, sort of this area, and that goes for both shoes, obviously, because that's the way I run, right here in the front. So my experience is going to be based off of that. I don't feel all that extra size on running shoes that a lot of other people might feel, or I don't feel it as much. So I do see a lot of people online talk about how big some running shoes are, but then when I try them, I personally don't have that experience. And that all comes down to my personal running mechanics and the way that I run. I'm not an overly shuffly runner, and I don't land further back in the shoe, so I don't roll through the entire thing. So I don't tend to notice when a shoe is overly bulky and big. That was one of the things I talked about when referring to my love of the Superblast 2, because my experience tends to be a lot more different to somebody else that lands further back in the shoe. Now, we're not going to spend too much time talking about running mechanics here. That's not what this channel is about. And I also think that the water's just become incredibly muddy there. Everybody ends up getting in arguments and we all hate each other. But I am just telling you why my experience might be slightly different to somebody like yourself if you're more of a shuffly runner. Now, that's the breakdown of those shoes as far as what you're getting with them. Now, what's the experience? The Evo SL is a really good running shoe, as you probably know if you've looked into it. That foam there, the Lightstrike Pro, is not just energetic, but it's incredibly durable. Actually, the more you use it, it softens up a little bit, and you get a little bit more from it as far as energy return and bounce. It's more of a foam where you kind of sink into it and then bounce back, making it an incredibly enjoyable run. The Asics, however, is also a really responsive foam, but it's a slightly different feeling when you're doing it. And Asics racing shoes or quicker running shoes, they tend to do things slightly different than brands like Adidas do. Whereas you would maybe sink in and bounce in this shoe, this shoe here is more of like a direct return. So as soon as you hit the floor, you just quickly bounce back. So it ends up being not quite as bouncy as the Adidas, but I don't necessarily think that there's less energy return. It's just a slightly different experience and feeling. The other thing I would say about the Adidas is because it's a lot softer and you do have that sinking and there's that cutout on the inside, it ends up being, for me at least, significantly less stable. I do find my foot turning in a lot more on this shoe when compared to the Asics. It's not really a problem when I'm doing quicker runs. Like, the majority of my runs end up being like longer threshold efforts or even intervals. I think this shoe is nimble enough to do those. But whenever I try to do a run where it's maybe a progression run, or I'm trying to do an easy run even, which I wouldn't recommend that shoe for that at all, I do notice that my foot is kind of coming in on the inside and I'm losing out on stability, and that is a combination of how soft the foam is and also that cutout that you have there. Adidas tend to put that cutout in their shoes. This one here is definitely in an attempt to trim away some of the weight. It is a really lightweight shoe, this, like the Asics to be fair. So you'll see there, this is the Takumi I've got, the same cutout. So they do have a tendency of doing that. But unfortunately, because of that, you do lose out on a lot of stability. They've tried to rectify it by making the sort of midfoot a lot wider than a lot of their other shoes. However, I do notice it on the run. When I speed up, however, it's not that big of a problem. However, something that is a big problem is the upper on this. I hate it. Now, the upper on this, like mentioned before, is an engineered mesh upper. The biggest problems I have with it are three things. The first one, the tongue. The tongue isn't gusseted, so it just kind of sits on the top and it bunches up. I'll include some pictures on the side, I don't know, like here, basically showing the problems I've been having when trying to get this locked down on my foot. The other thing that's annoying is that it's just a little bit too small for me. It's weird. I got it in a size 8. Now, whenever you're buying an Adidas shoe, for reference, they do the conversion from America slightly different to all the other brands do. So the way it works is you half a size up because it's half a size down when considering the conversion. I think that's right. Just half a size up, okay, when you're doing it. So I got these in a size 8. And I have these in a 7.5, but they end up being the same size when considering the American sizes. So it is my running shoe size. However, when I'm running in it, I end up hitting the front of the shoe and I can feel it distinctly right here on my toes, right at the front there. And it's quite annoying, if I'm being honest. Anytime I go downhill, my foot will just smack into the front of the shoe, and it's a problem for a lot of Adidas's lineup. I don't know if it's to do with the design of the shoe. I know that that rocker they've been putting on a lot of the running shoes recently has been sort of one of the reasons people have said that this tends to happen. There's pictures of people running marathons in the Pro 4, a very similar setup with bleeding toenails at the end, because that's what you want. Adidas haven't figured out the upper on this, at least in my case, when compared to some of the other shoes out there, and particularly this shoe here. Now, I have to admit, I mentioned this before in the last video, Asics do the best uppers when compared to any other brand, and it's no different here. This is an incredibly stripped back upper here. As you can see, it almost looks like a race fit. But there is a lot of padding here where you need it, and that's the point here. Asics are really good at giving you what you need and not giving you any more. So at the back, you get strips of padding. On the tongue, it's really thin, but it is semi-gusseted, so further down in the shoe, and you get 2 strips of padding there. And you get a lot more room in the toe box. I don't feel the front of the shoe at all here, so it's a lot better in that regard. So yeah, those are some of the differences that you get between these two shoes here. Then you have to ask yourself, right, am I willing to pay £80 more to get a slightly better experience on this shoe when compared to this shoe here? And I just don't see why you would. Yes, there are things about the Evo SL that are really, really annoying, and Adidas could be making effort to fix, and they probably will when they release the SL2. But they've already released 2 new versions of this shoe, one of them being a more trail one, but one of them being the SL Woven edition, where they've fixed the upper. I think they've semi-gusseted the tongue, which was a big problem with this one here, but they've kept the laces. which is annoying. But they're clearly making big efforts to improve this shoe, and guess what? It's still about £130 for it. So when you're thinking about it that way, I just don't see in what world you would consider buying the Megablast when you get a shoe like this on offer. It's insane when considering both of them. Now, I know that this shoe isn't going to be to everyone's taste. I have heard of people buying this shoe and then they've immediately returned it due to the lack of stability, and they might want to look at a shoe like this. Now, other than the comfort and the fit of the shoe, what are the other benefits you're getting when spending £80 more from the Evo SL to Asics' Megablast? Now, I would probably say the experience is a big one. You are getting a shoe that's significantly more versatile. Now, it's not just those slow runs. Another big thing that this shoe does really, really well is those longer run efforts. Those kinds of runs that you're probably going to start doing if you're doing marathon training going into the next season. Those kinds of long runs where you're doing a longer, maybe up-tempo effort where you're running at like a steady to marathon pace, or those ones where you're doing a long run where you're throwing in some faster reps in there, maybe like a 4x5k or whatever. This shoe is going to be a really good shoe for that. Whereas this shoe here, I don't think it excels at it to the same degree. I do find myself gravitating more towards the Megablast when considering a variety of different types of runs, whereas I'm more specific when I'm considering this shoe here. But again, that's just me. I do know people that can do every type of run in this shoe here, and they do longer types of runs in the Evo SL where they throw in those quicker reps and they have absolutely no problem. So I guess you just have to ask yourself, how much money are you really willing to spend? Do you want to spend £80 more and get a more consistent ride with the shoe and run into slightly less problems in my experience while you're running? Or do you want to spend a little bit less, or a lot less, let's be honest, and get something that's a little bit less consistent? Or do you want to try both of them and you might actually be okay in both of them and you just get the one for £130 because it's £130, making my video completely pointless entirely? Thank you very much for watching me rant here about running shoes. I do apologise for that. This video has not been near as concise as the first video I made. I think just when considering the two of these, the price thing just gets in the way too much. It's just too much of a gap, and I do find myself getting a little bit upset at how much brands are charging you now for these running shoes. It's ridiculous. There was a time where buying a pair of trainers or running shoes for £100 was considered ridiculous, and now we're all the way up at £210 for daily trainers. I'm not even considering the race shoes here. Oh, and by the way, Adidas, they're not angels in this either. In fact, they have a race shoe called the Pro Evo that comes in at £450, which they've been quoted in saying is only supposed to last you one marathon. Yeah, so that's where we're at now. So yeah, thank you very much for watching, and please, if you want to watch more videos like this, subscribe and like. I am going to be working on some other types of videos as well that are a little bit more structured. They're going to take me a lot more time than videos like this. This is more of like a kind of free-formy, podcasty type setup. The other ones are going to have like a specific theme, but because of that, it's going to take me a lot longer to both film, but more importantly, edit. So it'll be a while before any of them come out, but I'll try and upload a video like this maybe once every sort of 2-3 weeks. It's just trying to find the time to do it all. You know, we've all got lives and jobs and stuff. But yeah, thank you very much for watching. See you later.